We're still on the spin room. Thanks for sticking around with my guests Eli Chazan, Ruth Wasserman Lande, and Dalia Shelin. Still talking about those images that we saw in the Supreme Court about the disqualification of certain candidates. You know, the court is hearing these calls to disqualify people from both sides of the map, from the Jewish power extreme right-wing party and Arab parties, and a Jewish candidate from one of the Arab parties. But there are those, usually from the left, Ruth, who say that's a false symmetry. Is it a false symmetry?
Let me say it very clearly. You know, our party has a very strong, highly qualified, particularly value-oriented leadership that cares about this country. As such, it has said over and over, we put our trust in the institutions of law. And that's why it's not for me or you to decide whether the Arab parties or the Jewish person in an Arab party or the Ben Gvir party or other people are valuable to the Israeli democracy or should be outside it. It's for those institutions of law. I put my full trust in them, as does my leadership.
Do you have trust in the institution?
Yes, of course I have trust in the institutions, but I disagree with some of the decisions. For instance, take the basic law for the Knesset, 7a, which says one clear thing. If you're a racist or you're against the state of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, you cannot run in the election. And as you know, both sides violate this law. And nevertheless, the Supreme Court again and again and again approves them, and this is the Israeli democracy.
What do you think about this issue about false symmetry?
I think it's completely false symmetry, but by a different paradigm.
Okay.
In other words, I can't totally extract my own American roots, which says, you know, the really disqualifying factor here is incitement to violence. And I think what we've seen very clearly in the evidence of the petitions that was put before the court about the United Right, which includes the Jewish Power Party, is that they have made very explicit statements inciting to violence. Now, it's true, of course, we have a basic law about the Knesset. I mean, we can also agree and disagree on those laws. Basic laws sometimes get passed, and even a Knesset amendment can be, basic law can also be amended, and some things like this.
I want to ask you about Basal Ratas. I want to ask you about the speech of Tibi in Ramallah about the martyrs. Ahmad Tibi, the head of one of the Arab lists, they encourage incitement, they encourage terrorism. How come you can say this is equal? I cannot understand.
That's what's not in the petition, though. Those aren't in the petitions to the court.
No,
but these aren't. If they were not brought before the court in the petitions, apparently there wasn't enough evidence to put them in the petitions.
But
whereas there was lots of evidence.
I'm asking you about essential. They support terrorism or not?
If you give me an example of how they support terrorism, I will. No, but you didn't say what they said in those things. Basal Ratas, you can accuse him of smuggling a telephone into the jail. Is that supporting terror attacks?
He's in jail. So if you disagree,
well, he's in jail, so the law decided.
Okay. Right. And what about Ahmad Tibi? And what about it's very important, if you allow me. What about the speech of Ahmad Tibi in Ramallah? Embracing shaheeds, martyrs, and he says so very clear that he supports this kind of things. How come there is no response from the left wing?
I'd have to read the exact quote, but I have to tell you that both societies feel very strongly and explicitly support their fallen in a military conflict.
Okay, I want to move on, and I think it's if I use just one more pun, I'm sorry for this. It's high time we moved from the High Court to some polls. I want to show you one poll that was recently done from Channel 13, showing that the blue and white, your party, is leading with 31 seats. The Likud with 28 seats, a gap getting a little smaller there, and the right-wing bloc, by the way, is still even getting a bit stronger. Most importantly, and this is the story that is dominating the news, that little party at the bottom of the list with 4 seats, Zehut, led by Moshe Feiglin, the leader of this party. He's apparently stealing votes from left-wing parties like Meretz, for example, because he's campaigning on the legislation of cannabis, and apparently it's working. Why do you think it's working, Ruth?
Well, I think there are certain people in the Israeli public arena that rather than reading the quite extraordinary and surreal plan that Mr. Feiglin has regarding, I would say, policy-oriented issues that are quite relevant to our existence in this part of the world, and simply listen to his what should we call it, weed policy?
Yeah. I think you're alluding to some of the things that he says. You know, he's very libertarian, but some of his platform includes stuff like imposing a one-state solution, a Jewish Temple Mount. He is extremely,
moving the government compound, moving the government offices to the area near the Temple Mount, and don't forget the evacuation compensation for the people who live near the Temple Mount, so that they can leave the area, so that we can move the government compound.
So instead of listening to the weed policy, I would suggest to those people that are infatuated with this issue to simply read what he has to offer, and then they would perhaps have an idea of what it is on God's earth that they would be voting for.
It's good for the right-wing bloc. I mean, basically, it just makes your bloc stronger.
Yeah, no doubt
You're
about
happy
it.
about it.
The question is what is good for Israel, rather than this bloc or that bloc, that political party or that. It's all about Israel at the end of the day. Is it good for Israel? Of course not.
But you have to remember that almost in every political campaign, in every political elections in Israel, you have a new trend. And it seems to me that this trend is the witch trend.
Yeah, Dalia, probably, you've seen this a lot. Yeah. There's not either a trend or what they call this protest vote or the protest party. Is that what we're seeing here?
We're absolutely seeing that. I mean, we've had an example of this in pretty much every election, at least that I've been involved in, and I've been involved in most of them since 1999. There's always been a party that takes the 5 to 7% of Israelis who are not decided by the week before the election, and they're not decided not because they are just wishy-washy types, but because they're frustrated and they're alienated from the big parties, and they've seen all these faces in power, and they want to support somebody new. It almost doesn't really matter what the platform is. So I would say this isn't really totally about grass obsession.
And it's really influencing the campaign on all sides. I'm going to show you a clip from both Avi Gabay, the leader of the Labor, and Benjamin Netanyahu says, hey, let's talk about it.
But they're missing the point.
Well, let's listen.
They're quite missing.
I permitted the growers to grow it and turn it into a significant export market. And now I'm looking into it and will have an answer soon.
For 2 years, I've been saying that I support legalization everywhere. I'm here. Listen to me. We're in favor. We're in favor not just because of the youth, but because of what it does for ill people. People who are ill and run around and don't get what they should.
Is your party thinking about it now too, Ruth?
We are for decriminalization and the status quo, etc., but we certainly do not put this in the center of our party policy. I mean, what we care about, and I say this again and again, is the good of the general good of this country. The issues that really pertain to the cost of living, that pertain to the transportation, pertain to the real people, the elderly, the social aspect of this country. That's what this leadership actually cares about.
I cannot understand one thing. If you're against the cost of living, of course we are against it as well, how come you put in number 5 the head of the unions and a candidate for the Minister of Finance?
Let me reclassify my wording. We're not against the cost of living. We are for improving the cost of living. The cost of living, as somebody who lived in Lod for the last decade, is something that is extraordinarily difficult to swallow. Elderly people have not enough money, and they have to decide between medicine and food. This is a situation that cannot be sustainable. With your permission, it is not sustainable. Therefore, we're not against the cost of living. We are for changing the policy in a manner, and it includes the 5th member of the party, in a manner that would be suitable to make it the macro aspects of the economy suited to the micro aspects of the everyday living.
Israelis are happy with the macro direction of the country. They're not happy with cost of living, but when you ask them, they say, well, our country's doing just fine on the macro level. It's amazing. Look at our achievements. This is how Israelis perceive it.
This is why Netanyahu is so popular. One of the reasons.
Statistics in general.
Despite their difficulties with cost of living.
And then when you ask the grandmother, the Russian grandmother in Lod, and you actually ask her, she has no money for medicine, and she is the epitome of Israeli society today.
You're not replying.
Every 1 out of 4 children live under the line of poverty.
I'm not sure how.
Oh, there are many policies and many details as per how we are planning to do various things regarding transportation, regarding cost of living,
in the little time that we have left, I want to show you what you guys are doing. Both of your parties are doing campaign-wise. First, I'll start with a campaign ad showing the various lawmakers of the Likud. This was done by your party, the Blue and White List. Not only the Prime Minister have been convicted or at least suspected of corruption and other felonies, and just today, the Prime Minister is reacting with his own little video showing, for some reason, how he makes eggs. Let's have a look.
2 eggs.
relieve them a bit. Okay, that's what I can cook. But I also know what they are cooking. They're cooking up a leftist government supported by left-wing parties and Arab parties. They're not fooling anyone.
Well, I just want to say that I think that video was edited because at the beginning I did not see any fire or any heat under that pan, but that's something else. I want to ask you this. What do you make of this? Gantz focusing on the corruption issue. Netanyahu, again, warning from collaboration with Arab parties. Does either tactic bring new voters, or is this wooing the base that they already have?
Well, from a strategic perspective, Netanyahu needs to do three major things. He needs to stop voters from leaving. He would like to add new voters, and he would like to make sure that the right-wing bloc, is big enough. Even though, of course, he could also go into a coalition with Gantz, which I would not put past any of the parties.
Ellie doesn't see it happening.
But I think that, when you ask about what he has to, so those are the things he has to do. The way he wants to do it is by capitalizing on a few themes that have always worked for him in the past. One is internal division, targeting a particular group in Israeli society, whether it's left-wingers or Arabs, or preferably a combination of them, and saying anybody to the left of me essentially negates the Jewish character of the state, and victimization. They want to consider me corrupt, but I'm the victim.
Ruth, when you see that accusation over and over again from the Prime Minister about cooperating with the left and with the Arab parties, I wonder, why don't you say, yes, that's true? Is there something to be ashamed about?
First of all, obviously, my party leadership has really nothing to be ashamed of, because they have served this country in a manner that is beyond.
But I'm asking about the Arab parties.
And I will answer that. We have said very clearly that we shall not form a coalition with the Arab parties. That is not to say we do not embrace the Arab population that has equal rights in this country.
It's hard to embrace them when you won't cooperate with them.
No.
Or
the Arab parties, allow me to
say whether you'll cancel the nation state law.
What you have said just now is completely wrong, because the Arab parties, and every Arab person almost on the Arab street in this country will tell you, have done anything, but really a lot of things that are very little in touch with helping the Arab street. They have cared about Ramallah, and they have cared about the Palestinian rights, and they have done many other things. They have done very little to improve the daily lives of the Arab population in this country, and the Arab population in the country today feels it, knows it, and is looking for an alternative
But
leadership.
I'll tell you who has, and you're going to be surprised to hear me say this. That's Likud. I mean, we have to,
admit that they've
invested more than any other government.
Not only that, I want to give you some insights about it. First of all, we have a lot of Muslims and Christians, members of the party in general. Of course, we have this Plan 922, as we call it, an investment of 15 billion shekels in the Arab society. We have nothing against the Arabs. We have a lot against the Arab parties.
I just want to show you, Ellie, something that maybe you could react to, and this is the Arab parties taking a riffing off of Netanyahu's somewhat racist remarks back from 2015 election day, during saying that the Arabs were coming in buses to vote. And here we have the leaders doing a little spin there with buses in the background. What's your reaction to that? It's a nice spin.
I mean, he has said some pretty difficult things about the Arab population in general, particularly in the last few days.
20 seconds. You said the truth?
He said the truth. Netanyahu in 2015 said the truth. It was a press release of the Arab.
But what's wrong with that? What's wrong with Arabs going to the ballot box?
Wait a second. We didn't say that there is something wrong with that. Israel is a democracy, and if they go to vote, let me ask you something.
No, we have 10 seconds. Go ahead, quick. 10 seconds. That's all I have.
In the election of 2015, David Cameron said that the Scots are going to vote in mass numbers. What's the difference?
That's not good either.
Okay. That's not good either. Okay, that's all the time we have. Thanks to my guests, Ruth Wasserman Lande, Eli Chazan, and Dr. Dali Shannon. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much. And when we come back over to the U.S., where Speaker Nancy Pelosi